Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our focus on crime today is on the killing of police officers in the line of duty. Now, in the last 4 years alone, more than 150 officers have lost their lives to brutal force used by criminals. Police say there has been more than a 20% year-on-year increase in the number of police officers killed in South Africa, with just over 100 murdered in the 2023-24 financial year. On the ground, ordinary South Africans believe the laws of the country protect criminals a lot more than they do law-abiding citizens. A number of reasons have been cited for the killing of police officers, and they include robbery of their service firearms or officers killed while off duty to silence them regarding ongoing or previous investigations. And in some instances, officers are killed while trying to apprehend criminals. For a sense of, the bigger impact. And we're joined by a panel this evening by 4 guests, which include the likes of police's spokesperson for the South African Police Service, Lesiba Tobachale, policing expert Eldred de Klerk, and from the South African Human Rights Commission, Commissioner Nomahlubi Kwinana. A very good evening to you all. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the late edition. Perhaps let's start with Lesiba. There's been a growing concern that policing in South Africa is becoming more dangerous each year. What systemic issues, in your view, within the SAPS do you believe might be contributing to these rising officer deaths?
Thank you for having us, and greetings to the panel members and to your viewers. We are from the South African Police Union, which is SAPU, not SAPS, in this regard. The challenges that we are clearly faced with in terms of police killings are quite many. I mean, criminals themselves, they know that if they kill police officers, they are not going to face harsher sentences in terms of the repercussions that they have to face. That is why then they find it, easier for them, because if they get to be tried and they get to be found guilty, they get to be found guilty on just murder charges in this regard. And further to that, they also they have grown to have this whole brutality against police officers, because clearly they want to take their firearms. They want to use those firearms against more police officers. They want to use those firearms to terrorize the members of the community. And also our police officers, when they are faced with difficult situations or such situations where they have to act accordingly at that time, the challenge that comes by is that one has to think to say, will they receive the state protection? We have seen, we can use an example clearly, which speaks to the Krugersdorp 4, where the members, they found themselves, being stuck between a rock and a hard place, because at that time, when they were faced with danger, being shot at, they had to act thereafter. And after they had acted, they got to be left without any state protection. That's when us as a union, we had to come in and assist them in terms of the legal assistance. So issues that has to deal with the issue of protection. I mean, they are not representing themselves. When they are on duty, they are representing the interests of the state. And the state, the least that the state has to do is to make sure that they are protected accordingly. They are able to receive the necessary support that they must get when they are faced with those difficult situations. Because it is not up to anyone, being it management, for them to judge and to say a member was wrong if they had acted within the ambit or in regards to that. It has to be left to the courts. What they have to do is to give them that state protection. So just the split of a second decision making, it clearly contributes as part of the systematic challenges when it comes to the police killings. And we really need to deal with those when we are looking at what also contribute to police killings.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to Nomahlubi. I mean, Lesiba talks about the importance of receiving the necessary support. But as we look at the matter at hand, how does the Human Rights Commission view the rising number of police killings from a constitutional and rights-based perspective?
Well, it is concerning for us as Human Rights Commission And that is why in my focal area, which is civil and political, I have been trying to just get an engagement with the minister so that we can unpack these challenges. As you'll understand from the Human Rights Commission, in terms of Section 184, our mandate is threefold, and it is about protection, promotion, and of course, monitoring. And my idea really was to have a conversation around how this can be salvaged. And our topic for the year was about body cam, because the studies have shown that same has been used in other countries, and it has been useful in assisting, whether it is to protect the police officers themselves, but at the same time, just to ensure that no human rights violation happens whilst they are trying to effect an arrest or just to do their work. So from the Constitution, it is so that the right to life is protected, the right not to be abused is also protected. So there are all those protections in the Constitution. But what becomes a challenge really is the implementation of these very rights by the police themselves, especially when you go to Section 49 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which empowers them to act within the prescripts of the law reasonably, and of course to administer proportionately the force that they are likely to use. So what becomes really a challenge is it's whether they themselves are properly trained insofar as how they mete out or rather they are able to ward off the attack that would have been meted out towards them.
You mentioned a very important word. Perhaps let me take it to Lisiba, the operative word being force.
Was I audible?
You were audible. Just taking this conversation to Lisiba, Acting Police Minister Feroz Kachalia is against police using brutal force against officers. We heard Commissioner Kunana speaking about,
Was I audible?
the use of force. Yes, you were audible. Lisiba, what does it mean for criminals?
Lose me there?
Clearly, it is regulated in terms of Section 49 of the Criminal Procedure Act. And this notion of saying the police are using force inappropriately, I think we need to correct that, because the police are well trained. They clearly understand the issue of the use of force accordingly. And it really gets surprising to hear that, some would hold a view when the police are faced with dangers and then they respond accordingly in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. When we look at the use of force, to say that the police have acted, other way around. But when the police get to be in danger and then they lose their lives, we really don't hear even most of those people who are really saying that, the force that is being used by police officers, it is not appropriate, or it is not equivalent to the circumstance. Because Section 49, it clearly goes accordingly to really speak about the use of force that is minimum force, that is proportion to the danger that one is faced with under those reasonable circumstances. So the issue when the police are acting and then it gets to be demonized, I think we really need to dispel that, because there is IPED that is there to investigate, to look at all circumstances that involve shootings, that involves if there's injuries, if there's any fatalities that occurred when the police are doing their duties That is their job in relation to that. But a notion that gets to be pushed to say that the police are not using force accordingly, that is not a view that we would clearly agree with, because the police, they are well trained, they clearly understand the reasonable circumstances and the reasonable force that they have to use, which is termed to be a minimum force that they get to be faced under those types of circumstances. And, you know, they lose their lives. Police officers are also the members of society. They also have rights. If anyone has to speak of rights, we also must mention that they are citizens as well. They are the members who clearly understand their constitutional mandate, and they should also be protected. That is why our view in relation to that is that the acting minister of police in this regard must be able to influence legislation in parliament to have the killing of police officers being declared as treason. But the demonizing of the use of force, of minimum force by the police, we really need to really condemn that as an organization and really look at even those numbers. I mean, Mpo, you started with 150 police officers who were killed within a period of 4 years. What country do you really find where you get those higher numbers? We are not talking about those who lost their lives whilst they were off duty, because they also even get targeted when they are off duty because of them being police officers, because of the work that they do. Criminals realizing that they are not able to really catch them when they are on duty, then they target them when they are off duty. So the issue of police killings, to us, it is quite a painful thing, and we don't think it is something that has to be used, you know, for any other reason or to achieve any form of a specific agenda, because it is a very serious issue in this country and we need it to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know, it would have been nice at this point in time to have the SAPS's Atlenda Mate to respond to some of those remarks that you've made, Lesiba, but we did reach out to the SAPS and didn't get a response. But Aldred, let me pose this question to you as Lesiba speaks about all these really concerning elements, and one has to ask if there are sufficient laws empowering police officers to protect themselves when faced with life-threatening situations.
Indeed, it is the question, though the Criminal Procedure Act and the right to self-defense and police have been vested on our behalf with the authority to use force under circumstances where life and property is threatened. The laws seem to be sufficient. The problem is that we're facing a scourge of violence in the country where police are seen, unfortunately, as legitimate targets. And criminals believe that they can get away with it, so there's a measure of impunity. However, we also have to be inward-looking and ask questions of the institution. And a global survey conducted ostensibly in the US, where there's a lot more police shootings and police use of force, especially the discharge of firearms, pointed to police's concern where it came to their safety. Oops, now I'm gone. Hello?
You still with us? Okay, we seem to be battling with Aldred there, but we will get back to him. Perhaps let me take this to Commissioner Kwinana. You spoke, Lesiba, in fact, spoke quite a bit about the rights of the individual, the police officer, who is a member of society, irrespective of their role as a police officer in the SAPS. What are your views there when it comes to also looking at the human rights of the individual who happens to be a member of the SAPS?
Well, it is true that police officers themselves are human beings, and of course they enjoy the same rights as any other human being. In terms of the Constitution, in terms of any law that we have in our country. And it is so that it then becomes very much important in how they handle themselves with regard to any matter that they are faced with. And what we have observed is that when police and communities are able to talk about different issues that affect them negatively or positively as a community, it then assists the police in how they get matters resolved and even can really save lives, especially of police officers. because, with the situation where they are faced with whether a life-threatening situation, but if they're in a community where they are known, that is not likely to happen because of, the manner in which they.
Okay, we seem to have a problem there with Commissioner Kwinana. Perhaps let me take this to Lesiba. I mean, just touching on the role of the police, do you think there needs to be more for the police to rebuild trust between themselves and communities, especially where police killings may also be linked to public distrust?
Yeah, there's nothing that justifies to say if there's any trust deficit that exists between the society and the police, that the police must be killed. I think we should not even go there, because the right to life, it is applicable to everyone. The issue of the relationship between the society and the police is important. It is an ongoing process that we are fighting, and we keep on rebuilding on it, because it is an ongoing thing that we really are working to make sure that there is that trust that is rebuilt between the police and the members of society. Because the police, without the society, they cannot have anyone to police. The society, without the police, they will have no one to police them. So the relationship between the two is quite important. That is why we are saying that the role of community policing forum in all of our communities, it is quite important, because through those types of structures which are recognized, then it is quite easier for the relationship between the society and the police to be ventilated there. If there's any issues that are concerning the members of society, or that are concerning the police about the members of our society, they can be able to be ventilated there, and then we are able to rebuild that trust. We are able to deal with all of the issues that are there, and we are able to say that both of us, we coexist. We clearly we need one another to fight against one enemy, which is crime, because the only enemy we're faced with, it is the crime that is so high in the country. So the issue of the trust, it is an ongoing thing, and then we need to use all effort to make sure that we keep on rebuilding. Definitely, we acknowledge there are some incidents that seems to be breaking that trust. But if you go to a supermarket to buy a whole bag of potatoes, and inside you find one or two that are rotten, you don't take the whole packet. You don't take the whole packet and throw it away, but you isolate those ones, and then you still use those ones that are still good. The very same thing applies with the police. Majority of them, we have good police officers who are abiding by their oath and who are doing what is expected of them, who are serving our communities with pride, and we must acknowledge them. I mean, the prisons is so cool because of the good police officers who have done their job and who continue to be patrolling our streets as we are seated where we are seated in this interview as we speak. And we need to give them credit. They work under very difficult situations, lack of resources, lack of budget, they are not being promoted. There's just a whole lot of issues that they are faced with. They are faced with police killings as well. So let us also, appreciate the efforts that they are making under difficult circumstances that they find themselves in.
I'm still hoping that before the end of this discussion, the SAPS's national spokesperson, Athlenda Mate, will join in. But Eldred, let's take this one to you. There's a perception that the law is perhaps too soft on criminals. Is this a fair assessment, or is there a deeper problem that we're not seeing here as we try and understand the system issues? Okay, we seem to be having trouble with Eldred. Perhaps let's take this back to Commissioner Kwinana. Commissioner, I'm hoping that you're still with us. What are your thoughts when it comes to how the justice system's handling of police killers reflect on the country's national values and priorities?
Well, the law is for everyone. It's not selective. It is for all the people in the country. So whether it is police or it is ordinary citizens that could be found against the law will prevail. And of course, the courts will then use the law in order to inquire into whether indeed the person is guilty or not. Now, obviously, what becomes important is the evidence that is presented before the court. And if the evidence is not sufficient, this is where you see matters, unfortunately, do not get finalized, maybe in a positive way, which we would have wanted, having seen that somebody has lost their lives. So what is important then for us is how do police investigate these matters, the type of evidence that is brought before the court, so that the courts are able to make proper findings on the evidence that is before court. I think there's one thing that we are really lacking in South Africa to a certain extent. It's just the way we collate our evidence. There seem to be a number of cases where you'd find that procedures were flawed, and unfortunately, this is where legal practitioners will thrive, because they will see those lacunas, those gaps, and they will take those opportunities to use that against the matters before court. So we just need to do more training for police, how they collate this evidence. From the start, they need to be above board. So continuous training is imperative for our subs, but not only the subs, even the prosecution, when they handle this type of matters. And, constantly and, almost everyday training, and just paying attention to whether the officials that are seized with these matters, are they qualified enough to handle them, so that we don't find instances where these matters ultimately we find that people are found not guilty because there were just mishaps insofar as how the matters were brought before the court. But I think that our laws, are good insofar as protection of both citizens, of course, as well as police officers. But it is just in how they are being used that, for me, it remains a challenge, which challenge I think can be circumvented by ensuring that everyone is properly guided in how they present cases before the courts, and of course, our judiciary as well.
Perhaps let's put this conversation on hold and return on the other side of this as we continue to unpack the elements of policing in South Africa and the number of officers that have been killed over the past 4 years. Over 100, nearly 150 to be precise, have been killed in the last 4 years. We continue in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us as we draw the spotlight on police killings in South Africa. We continue our panel discussion with the policing expert Eldred de Klerk, as well as Lesiba Tobagalo of the South African Policing Union, and Nomatlubi Kwinana of the South African Human Rights Commission. Eldred, a lot was said by Commissioner Kwinana, really touching on some of the key issues that pose a question on the kind of police training in South Africa. Is it sufficient as we look at the number of cases that are bungled, as we look at the evidence that isn't collated correctly? What are your thoughts?
That's a good question, and I think it's a key observation by the Commissioner. Unfortunately, a global survey of police in 2025 pointed to 3 areas. 1, poor training. 2, inexperienced officers. 3, absent leadership. And that is borne out in the situation and in conversation with police in South Africa too. The training has to be, and this is not theoretical, it has to be reality-based, real-world-based scenarios. They have to be properly resourced. They have to be properly supported. And we have to look after the physical and mental health of our officers. And where our officers do act, this is where Lesiba was saying, they have to be supported and have the convictions of their action as professionals, and then you support them in those actions. And that's where leadership matters most. So when officers feel supported, they've been properly trained for today's policing challenges, and they have been properly resourced and supported by fellow officers whom they trust, then we'll see that police will be. And you also mentioned the fact that their defensive tactical training is probably not up to scratch. So we should move from classroom-based or training to real-life training, and to training weekly and not yearly, so that officers are fit for purpose, fit for duty, and they can act with conviction and can act appropriately and with the appropriate use of force when they are confronted and their own lives and the lives of citizens are at stake.
Lesiba, as Eldred speaks about the psychological support, the physical and mental health of police officers, what support in terms of the psychological factor, financial, is there, especially as we consider the number of police officers who've been killed and the loved ones they leave behind?
Yeah, no, I think maybe let's touch a little bit on the issue of training.
Yeah.
We think that training, it's the police are well trained. The challenge that is there is that you've got a bigger population with a very less number of police officers to police the country. So that issue, it needs to be balanced. We really need to resource even more on the human capital and go into the physical resources, which are quite important, so that they can be able to do the job appropriately as it is expected. In terms of the support, mental health, I think it's one of the challenges that the police are faced with. I mean, the types of crime scenes that our police officers go to attend, ranging from murder, it goes to there's car accidents, where there's fatalities. There's just, even they themselves getting shot, they attend to different types of traumatic crime scenes. And as we speak, we know that the employee health and wellness component in SAPS is not fully capacitated, and then it is not able to debrief members accordingly when they have had a traumatic incident that they have attended to. Before they go home, ideally they should be debriefed so that that trauma doesn't stay with them. But because of the lack of capacity in terms of employee health and wellness component itself within SAPS, that is not being done as it is expected for it to be done. Definitely that will take a toll on any human being, because we're not talking about machines here, we're not talking about robots, but we are talking about people who have feelings, we are talking about people who also have families. And then some of this trauma, when it comes out, it blows when they are at home. Then we hear of some issues which stems out around domestic violence and this and that, and some they would commit suicide, which is a problem that also still needs to be addressed, because mental health, it is a very serious issue that needs to be attended to by having the necessary professionals who would be able to give them the necessary support that they need as well. And in terms of the families, yes, if one has died on duty, there is some financial contributions that SAPS do pay, but even the contribution, it cannot replace a life.
Yeah.
As SAP, being a trade union here, we are standing for to say that we need to secure the human life of our police officers. When they fasten their boots, as we speak now, the sad thing, Mpo, is that when one fastens their boots in the morning or going for the night shift, they are not sure whether they'll be able to come back home to their families, whom they are going there to work in order to earn a living for them in this regard. So lack of that guarantee, it really becomes a problem, because of then there is no guarantee in terms of life.
Absolutely, some very harsh realities. Let me thank you for being part of this panel as we close it up. South African Policing Union's Lesiba Tobachale, as well as Eldred de Klerk, who's a policing expert, and Nomatlubi Kwinana, who's from the South African Human Rights Commission. Thank you so much for your time and contributing to this conversation, as we, of course, shine the spotlight there on crime in South Africa, but specifically looking at police killings. We do continue on the other side of this to bring you more news. Stay with us.